Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and I welcome you to tonight's second episode of Sword and Sorcery Cinema. We have Michael Del Russi and Bob Vosseller with us so far, and we'll soon be joined by Setna of Khemet. Each are sharing our memories and perspectives of a certain aspect of this wonderful genre. I'm going to start off talking a little bit about Deathstalker, and I have my notes here. There were 4 Deathstalker movies between the 80s and the early 2000s, plus one movie that should have been a Deathstalker movie because it basically duplicated the plot of the first Deathstalker, but they didn't designate it as such. The first movie was Deathstalker, of course, and in it, a barbarian warrior in a fallen civilization had to retrieve 3 talismans to gain power over creation. And that was the plot, and he succeeded, of course, and it ended, but not with after. The second Deathstalker movie, Duel of the Titans, which was 1981, that was a parody of Sword and Sorcery. And although I didn't want to like it, I wound up liking it a great deal, and it remains one of my favorite Sword and Sorcery movies of all time. Fortunately, both the first Deathstalker and the second Deathstalker are very easily viewed. You can watch them for free on YouTube and on Tubi. The next 2 Deathstalker movies are not as easy to find, and that will involve some major questing. The third one was called Deathstalker and the Warriors from Hell. And this was my least favorite Deathstalker, and I think it's everybody's least favorite Deathstalker. The first movie had one Deathstalker, the second movie had another Deathstalker, the third movie had yet another Deathstalker. So Deathstalker seems to be a title rather than somebody's name, which is something they parodied in the second movie, where Gabrielle asked Deathstalker, is Deathstalker's first name or his last name? And of course he didn't answer. There is no answer. The fourth Deathstalker brought back the first Deathstalker, and that was called Deathstalker 4, Match of the Titans. And although it brought back the first Deathstalker, it didn't bring back the story, so we have no idea what happened to the powers of creation and why he no longer possesses them. Instead, he's looking for a sword that he left with a friend, and the friend has mysteriously vanished. And it's kind of like a mystery investigation as well as a sword and sorcery tale. And the last film was in the early 2000s, I believe 2003 or 2006. It was called Barbarian. And Barbarian was a remake of the first Deathstalker. And even some of the names, like Lord Munkar, who's the bad guy in the first Deathstalker, remain. Different actor, younger actor. The witch was also portrayed in this film by a younger actress. And Deathstalker was not called Deathstalker, it was called Cain. But the quest for the 3 talismans remained, and they were the same 3 talismans from the first Deathstalker movie. There's a new Deathstalker movie being made right now, and if you go to the internet, you'll find updates periodically. And before that movie comes upon us with yet another Deathstalker, I'm told, there are Deathstalker comics. And of course, you can watch the old movies, Deathstalker 1, Deathstalker 2, and Barbarian very easily and for free. And Deathstalker 3 and 4 are more difficult to find. Deathstalker 3 was spoofed and lampooned on Mystery Science Fiction Theater. So you can find that with commentary on one of the DVDs. But this is the first issue of Deathstalker. And I don't know if we'll be able to see it.
It's a little blurry. If you pull it back, maybe
No, so we won't be able to see it. But Deathstalker 1 introduces to the new Deathstalker, and it refers a lot to the second movie, so I guess it happened in that universe. But none of the characters look or behave like they did in the second movie. And then it throws occasional references to the other movies. Deathstalker 2 and 3 continue the story. There are tons of Easter eggs, and not only from the Deathstalker universe, and not only from Roger Corman's Sword and Sorcery universe, which is where these take place, but from other Sword and Sorcery universes and movies as well. And then there was the first crossover, Barbaric versus Deathstalker. So I don't know if they're planning any other crossovers, but we will be monitoring that, not so much on this show, but on the group that we have on Facebook. So if you're into these type of things and want to learn about obsessive little details and updates, that'll be the best place to get them. So I'm through with my very brief overview, and we'll move on to Michael Del Russi, who's going to share his memories, impressions, and thoughts on the first Conan the Barbarian movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Well, I couldn't be more excited when Conan was first released. But in order to share my enthusiasm for Conan in general, I'd like to go just for a minute before we talk about the film.
Sure.
To reflect on how I was introduced to the character. I came across the paperbacks, I would say between the late 1970s and 1982, and between that space. Of course, this is after the great decade of sword and sandal cinema had long passed. This was before DVDs and VHS even, where you could get them, but it was very rare. So when I saw on the stands two strength heroes, Conan the Barbarian, paperbacks, and Doc Savage, they reignited my enthusiasm for strength heroes in general. I was going to the gym at the time, I think 6 days a week in Gateway gyms in Bloomfield, New Jersey. But my introduction to Conan came with the Bantam books in 1982. But before Bantam, it was a series that was published by Ace Books and
Zebra.
L. Sprague de Camp had kind of like taken over the character somewhat at that point. Lancer Books was also involved at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And he finished a lot of what Howard didn't finish, and he wrote a couple of his own novels. So this is how I was originally introduced to Conan. This was my first exposure to Conan the Barbarian, and I couldn't be more excited. I mean, the novels were great. I enjoyed them all, but this is before the comics, as I recall. I had not seen, if the comics had been released at that time, I was not aware of it. I became aware of them later, but for me, the comics, it was a black and white magazines, which really threw me for a loop. I mean, I loved the black and white comics, and somewhere in my storage unit, I have a very handsome and well-protected collection, which I'm still trying to get to because I wanted to get them out to you. They're all in plastic. And but that was my first introduction to Conan the Barbarian, were the L. Sprague de Camp series from 1967, and then Lancer Books later on, and then Lancer folded as well, and L. Sprague de Camp began writing his own Conan novels. I'm not sure how many he wrote, but this was my inspiration. I would go to the park and take the paperbacks along with me, usually after the gym, and I just couldn't be more excited. To me, it was the beginning of the rebirth of the strength hero and sword and sandal cinema, or as it would be known later, in this case, sword and sandal sorcery. But Conan the Barbarian itself, when the movie was released, I think it was 1982. It couldn't have been more perfect in my eyes. I thought the film was, quite frankly, and you won't hear me say this too often, perfect in every way. And around 1982, of course, Arnold was at the height of public attention. He was at the height, the king of the bodybuilding world. And now he was starring in the role of probably one of the greatest fantasy heroes known at that time anyway. At least that's my opinion. So in 1982, I believe the film came out. and it was perfect. I thought Arnold was perfect for the role. I loved some of the his sword sessions that he did when he was practicing with the sword. I thought it was absolutely incredible. And then, of course, James Earl Jones, I thought, was fantastic in the role. Everything about the film, I thought, lived up to the character. So for me, and again, you won't hear me say this about too many films, I thought to introducing the movie world to Conan the Barbarian, I think they did a fantastic job. James Earl Jones as the villain was superb. The film received a little bit of criticism. They felt there was some violence in it that could have been avoided, especially for young people. But Conan seeking revenge for the murder of his parents, and the whole plot line was excellent. From what I understand, the movie's budget was about $20 million, but it grossed between 68.1 and 74.1 million dollars. Let me say honestly that I wouldn't have changed a thing with this film. For me, the balance of the film was excellent. The plot was superb, very imaginative, and I wouldn't have changed a thing. And it reignited my enthusiasm for strength heroes, for the world of mythic fantasy, and it just opened up the doors once again to my enthusiasm in terms of the characters, the mythical characters that supported my life through my school years, through my years of writing. I was writing at the time, and as a person, it was a whole new reintroduction, if you will. And then, of course, we had Gladiator released. Now, I'm not sure if Gladiator was released before or after. Maybe you might remember that.
I believe it was afterwards.
It was afterwards, okay.
Yeah.
And then with the release of Gladiator, I really expected a whole new era of sword and sandal films and sword and sandal fantasy, if you will, to overtake us once again. It never really happened the way I would have expected, but the best may very well yet to come. But it was a rebirth of the excitement you felt when you saw a strength hero on the screen and really depicting the part that I feel he lived up to the character, truly lived up to the character. So those are my recollections. And as you know, you probably already know, sword and sandal cinema and sword and sandal fantasy. They were character builders. Sociologically, they still haven't received the credit I think they would do, the impact they had on young people. But I can say this, Arnold, we have to give Arnold full credit. Not only did he rule the heights of the bodybuilding world at the time, with this movie, he did something that was just, for me, was unimaginable at that time. Couldn't imagine this happening all over again. So the film was, I thought, tremendous. The cinematography was great. I would have not changed a thing. In all candor, I wasn't that excited with the follow-up, but the original was sensational. And those are my recollections of Conan from that point. But I was not familiar with the character until the years of Lancer publications and when L. Sprague de Camp decided to take the character over at that point.
That's when I came into the story with Conan through the Lancers. I believe Zebra had it at one point, but I'm not positive. And I discovered the comics also, and that further immersed me in the world. but you've touched upon so many things that I want to talk about, but unfortunately we don't have the time today, so this will be a to be continued. And we're going to continue with the second Conan, Conan the Destroyer, which Setna of Khemet will share his impressions on with his cobra staff.
Well, I mean, I'm a sorcerer, correct? And a wizard.
Very
So I
good.
thought, well, I'll bring a magic wand with me. My favorite movie of all the Conans is Conan the Destroyer. Why? Because of the cast. You have Mako, who is an amazing sorcerer. You've got Walt Frazier, the basketball star, playing a villainous henchman. You've got Sarah Douglas, who we all knew from Superman, and she was the rotten villain there too. And you've got, of course, Arnold, and my surprise, which was Grace Jones. Now I have a surprise for you. I worked on this film.
Oh, awesome.
I was one of 9 makeup artists that worked on this film. And Arnold acknowledged me at Georgette Klinger. He says, I know you. I don't. You were the guy. You were the one with Grace. And I said, yes, I was. And it was a shocker that he remembered me. He had a huge cigar in his mouth, and he was with his then wife, Maria Shriver. He said, they bleached my hair for twins. Ha, 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 ha. And because nobody was paying attention to him. They were paying attention. My boss, Bonnie, was pregnant, and so was Mrs. Shriver. And so they were laughing. They were like, oh my God, here you go, Conan. Here you go, Arnold. It was really kind of fun. So that was cool. But because I have an interest in magic and ritual and things, this whole thing was wonderful. Your cast was amazing, Hercules. Not only do you have Wilt Chamberlain, who I love, but you've also got, as I said, Grace Jones and my wonderful Sarah Douglas. You have Olivia Gilbo. Olivia, later on, you might remember, plays a villain on CSI Miami. CSI Miami. She plays a very evil villain, and she also does the same thing on NCIS, where she plays in Criminal Minds, excuse me, where she's a wild murderess, and she's killed off 3 husbands, and eventually they get her. Hercules, are you able to see me?
Yes.
Some weird things are going on here.
Yeah, I see you, and it looks like you're moving in a very exaggerated way. I thought you were doing a special effect or something.
No, I think it's my camera. But so this was a great. I thought this was hot. How you doing? How are you today?
You have like a little hand in front of your face. I don't know if I'm the only one seeing it. It's a little
on his left.
Yeah,
not on the space. I see it floating in space.
Yeah,
I don't know what that is, but there is a hand there. I don't know where that came from.
In meetings, what that usually means is somebody is raising their hand. So let's.
Oh, I'm not raising my hand. I don't know why that's there.
Okay.
I don't know. But anyway, so it was kind of fun being part of that film. I was one of 10 or 15 makeup artists. There was a huge cast, a lot of extras. The villain, the knights, you had the populace, that whole scene in the end with the temple. It's an interesting movie because you've got Dagoth, the god, and Sarah Douglas's idea is that she's going to sacrifice this beautiful young girl who is anything but a virgin. If you look at her, she's built like a Playboy model. She wasn't. And Arnold, for some reason or other, didn't find her attractive. He wanted his own Valeria back, and so Sarah Douglas, the evil queen, puts a spell on Conan, hypnotizes him, and so she brings the image of Valeria back from her funeral pyre, and he says, "Okay, I'll help you." And she says, you've got to collect 2 things, 2 treasures, and that this young girl will then lead you wherever she's going to lead you to find the treasures. And this is where we encounter Mako, the sorcerer, because Conan says there's sorcery involved. I'm going to need my own sorcerer. And so he gets Mako to come back And there's a whole thing that goes on with them. They're going to roast him. And I don't mean like Milton Berle used to. They've got him on a spit when you first meet Mako. And he's going to become these cannibals, these cannibals dinner, which is not cool. A roasted old wizard. And as an old wizard, I don't think it's so cool. So they go on and, it's kind of like a Conan the Barbarian Wizard of Oz, because you pick up characters as you pick up the show. And as it goes along. The character that Walt Fraser's playing is called Bombata. Bombata is a warrior, and he's supposed to be the protector of the young lady, and he's really there to kill her eventually if we have to. The evil witch, Sarah Douglas, who is called Queen Tamaris, wants him to kill off Arnold eventually, so that Princess Jenna will become the sacrifice. She's a virgin, and it's on her birthday that they're going to come back. Now, what happens is that there's a horn that she has to find and a stone. And the first sorcerer we get is Mako, of course. But then they come and they meet, I think his name is the Grand Vizier. You get Torga. He's going to meet Torga, and he's going to, I'm sorry, not Torga. I missed it.
Yes, Tothamon was his name.
Right. Tothamon. You should be shocked for that. Amenhotep, Tothamon. And he's going to get from him the crystal. And they're in a crystal. He turns into like a dragon of smoke, or a vulture of smoke. And he picks the young girl up and brings her to what looks like an ice palace or a crystal palace. And they have to get to it. And Mako discovers where they are. And he says, you've got, using his powers. And he goes down in there. He says they're in the water. Now, there's also the crazy one, portrayed by Tracy Walter. His name is Malik. He's the thief. If you remember him from the other movie, he's a sneaky little thief. And he comes with Conan also. And he's going to be there to comic relief, I think, more than anything else. But he does help out when he has to. He's a coward, and he's very funny and very cute. I like the way this movie is constructed, because you do have a lot of different kinds of characters and different levels of energy, and that's important, I think. When you have the leader of the after he defeats, which is a very dramatic thing with Tothamon turns into a mirror monster. He is a gorilla. What would you call it, Hercules? He's kind of a muscle gorilla, demon-looking thing. He's got a red cape on, and he's got, very bad, if you don't mind me saying so, as a makeup artist, a very bad mask. Yeah, it looks like something you could get at a Halloween shop.
That was taken from the Robert E. Howard stories. They based it on Thak, who was the man-ape that young Conan fought.
But it's a terrible costume. I told the people that were working on it at the time, what can we do better? And their budget was there, and they had this costume, so they said, "Let's do it." Who was I? I was, what was I? Maybe 28 or so, and I was a nobody. They didn't know who I was. Just another aide, and I had to keep my mouth shut because I would have gotten fired, and I needed that job. Believe me, I did. So I kept my mouth shut. And it was shot all over the place. It was an interesting trip, coming and going where we were to, partially New Zealand, partially, I think it was Romania that we were in, and Hungary. It was an interesting thing. And I liked it. It was fun to be running around like that. Somebody else thought it was all in California, and no, it wasn't. I wish it was. And it rained a lot too, which was kind of not so good. Anyway, so he kills the monster. Grace Jones and Tracy Walter are already yelling and screaming. And all of a sudden, Conan decides that the mirror monster can only be killed by crashing all the mirrors. He gets it because the monster has grabbed him by his legs and it's flinging all over the place. And he accidentally breaks the first mirror. And then he realizes, okay, the sky is all reflections. He throws his sword. It goes right through one of the mirrors and right through the wizard's heart. And the wizard disintegrates. He touches the crystal, and bingo, he's gone. He bounces into 1,000 different pieces of light. And then, of course, that's bad because his magic is broken. And then, what happens? They got to get the hell out of there. right? Because you know what's going to happen if they don't. They're all going to be perish. So they go and they come to the last one, which is the horn. They come to a cave, they find an entrance to a cave, and they know they have to get this horn. So Jenna uses the power of the crystal to get the horn. She takes it, and then they're going to go back. And of course, there's a whole lot of trouble going on that way. And finally, Wilt Chamberlain, Bambata, grabs the girl and drags her back to the palace where Sarah Douglas and all the high priests and high priestesses and all these other people are waiting for her so they can put this horn back in the statue of Dagoth. And they make her drink, because it's her birthday, they make her drink a potion that makes her drowsy because she's going to be sacrificed. So, of course, Conan doesn't want her to be sacrificed. Mako reads the hieroglyphs that are on the wall, and it says that blah, 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 blah. When the girl is sacrificed, the spirit will come to life. At the point, the point where he starts to breathe, they want him to kill her immediately. And what happens is, of course, Conan has interrupted everything. So the monster deteriorates. Dagoth, the god, the beautiful dreaming god, becomes this disgusting looking demon monster with the horn and kind of, he sort of looks like a somewhere between a mole and a platypus and a walrus, I suppose. It's really he's got claws. It's a really interesting costume, crazy wise. So Conan, of course, fights with him. And in the meantime, the horn goes right through Sarah Douglas and she dies. And Mako says, pull the horn out. And they're all yelling and screaming, the horn, pull the horn out. And he rips it out by the roots. There's blood and green gore and everything everywhere. And he kills it. And then at the end, Conan and the rest of them are all there. They're acting very interesting because she asks for the greatest wizard in the world, and Mako steps forward. She asked for the greatest warrior to her captain guards. And of course, Grace Jones, being Zula, who has a very dramatic scene, comes and she takes on. Then, of course, she's going to go and ask her a fool. And of course, that's Malik. He's the great fool. And it's really cute and funny. And then she says she wants him to rule Shadazar with her. And he says, no, I'm going to have my own kingdom and my own lover, my own queen. And that would be Valeria. He still believes that somewhere along the line, she'll come back from heaven and save and be with him. And that's how it kind of ends. He goes on and on back in his journey. And it says, there's supposed to be a third, and it never happened. That was Conan the King, I believe, Hercules.
Yeah, they were supposed to do Conan the King, and they returned to that later on, but it hasn't happened yet, or it might not.
No, I know.
But
I don't think Arnold can.
They were supposed to, Conan was supposed to be in Red Sonja, but they had rights problems, so they called him Calidor. But even when they were promoting the first Red Sonja film, Arnold was saying, but he's Conan, wink, wink. And a lot of people have said that since, that even though they're calling him Calidor, it was Conan.
Well, even in the books, Red Sonja and all that, I was in love with Frazetta. That was one of my favorite comic book artists. I loved his work. I have posters somewhere in the house rolled up of I have Vampirella, I have many Conans somewhere. I'm not sure, when I moved, everything got rolled up and put in boxes, and I still have things I haven't opened 8 months later, which is terrible, but it's true. I don't know where to put things still, and I have more Egyptian statuary than I think King Tut did. So we're going to have to see what I can do with that. But I really enjoyed this film.
All four of us are having stuff in boxes problems.
Before I left, I went to Home Depot and I got those great big those plastic storage bins. They're like, 3 feet long by 2 feet wide or something. Well, and I have a bunch of them in the house. They have, tapestries and all kinds of amazing, interesting things. So, I'll have to see what goes on with that. But the point is, I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was funny in some parts, supposed to be serious, and they were funny too. So, it was, I think it was a good time. And I think everybody that did the film had a ball doing it. Um, and I just think anybody that really loves Conan and loved the first one will like this one. Yeah, I think even more, because I do think it was a little, a little silly, but a little just really a good time. That's all I can say.
Well, it was a fun movie. It was written by the comic book people, though. Roy Thomas was involved, and a couple of other comic book people were involved. Whereas the first one was based more heavily on the books,
Hmm.
set of paintings. If you look through the first movie, there are scenes that were in Frazetta paintings throughout the movie, and not just Conan scenes, but there was like the Egyptian priestess in front of the Egyptian pillar. There was like you could find these things, and you could even find Savage Sword of Conan and Savage Tales covers, like when he's holding up Thulsa head in the first thing. That was the cover of Savage Sword #1 with Conan. So it had lots of Easter eggs, and it was based a lot on the writings, whereas the second movie was based on the comic book, so it had a lighter feel, and it wasn't rated R. There wasn't any like nudity or excessive blood or anything in the second one. Uh, and Conan, like I said, he's supposed to be Calidor and Red Sonja, or not, depending on how you wanna look at it. Conan also appeared in the Jason Momoa movie, which was a remake and didn't go anywhere. And he was in The Whole Wide World, where Vincent D'Onofrio played Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan, and acted out some of the Conan, scenes, and you got to see how they sprang from his subconscious. There's since been a Conan TV series, Conan the Adventurer, a Conan cartoon named Conan the Adventurer, and a second Conan cartoon called Conan and the Young Warriors. And there were paperbacks, comic books, novels galore, and they're still publishing new novels and new comics. And that'll be our segue into Bob, who's going to take us on a tour of Conan in the comic books.
Well, and it's
Cool.
kind of appropriate in that that is how I first became more familiar with the character, and not through the novels, but being an avid comic book fan and DC and Marvel. I became aware of Conan's popularity, but I was still gravitating a lot towards superheroes, outside of, say, the exception of Tarzan. For with that at the time, DC had the rights to Conan. I mean to Tarzan, excuse me. And but I was aware of Conan, but I didn't really get into Conan until being also a collector of the Mego dolls. And when Conan became available, I just had to get Conan. But then I was like, okay, I have the doll of Conan with his axe and his sword and his dark hair, and it looked like he just walked right out of the comic book. And I was young, so of course I would make my own adventures and my own stories. I was like, well, I need to know more about Conan. I'm going to have to start reading the comic book, and so I did. And John Buscema and Roy Thomas was the creative team at the time. I read the letters columns, and of course, there's all these references to all these books and all this history behind the character and the various fictional countries that he traveled through and characters. And then I came across back issues that I believe it was Barry Windsor Smith, was the first artist. I could be wrong on that, but from the early 70s, or earlier 70s. So I became, kind of immersed. I also was aware of the magazine, but I already bought so many comics, to go into the budget of, I think at time, which was a lot, was like, I don't know, $1.75 for the
Mhm.
magazine, or something like that. It was more than the comic book, and I was already pushing the limit on all the comics that I would buy. So, even though I would get Planet of the Apes, which was the magazine, um, I didn't pick up Conan, but I did very much enjoy the comic book, and immediately became fascinated by the character. to the point where I also picked up the Power Records big
Mm-hmm.
album with 4 adventures that I believe were based on comic book stories.
No,
Of Conan.
they were based on information in the comics, but they were original. The comics later adopted a few of them, but they were original stories for the records.
I think the album cover had the album cover, and I don't know if I still have it because of damage from Superstorm Sandy.
Yeah.
But I remember the album cover was just this great picture that probably John Buscema had drawn of Conan, and it was, you know, like I had to have that, and that was also another big introduction, because the stories were short, but they were good. You know, they set up a scene, and you know, so yeah, so Marvel had Conan for quite a number of years, and it was the Conan the Barbarian, the title. They did do a spin-off. They obviously did Red Sonja and King Conan later on. And coincidentally, I happened to be at my local comic book store today, and knowing I was doing this show tonight, was looking specifically for Conan, and I couldn't find the regular Conan title either by Dark Horse or Marvel, but I did come across a more recent Marvel when they had reacquired the rights to Conan of King Conan. So 5 and 6. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but
You're doing better with that than I did. When I did, nothing showed. You with yours, it's a little fuzzy, but it came out clearly.
yeah, yeah, it looks interesting. I can't wait to. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to actually read them before tonight, but I plan to soon. And the King Conan title was interesting. Obviously, it's in his later years. At the conclusion of the first movie, you know, we know he's going to become a king, and that movie, as we know, ended with but that's a story for another time. You know, that's a tale for a, you know, basically another movie. So I'm kind of hoping that since Arnold has come back in, you know, like Terminator, and that we've seen, so, you know, actors like Harrison Ford and Sylvester Stallone and everybody like come back to their some of their greatest original characters, you know, be it from Blade Runner, Indiana Jones, Rambo, you know, Rocky, that Arnold will return as King Conan. You know, obviously with probably a younger son or somebody to do some of the heavy lifting, literally in this case. So I hope we see that in Hollywood. I mean, why not? You know, I can see that happening. But it's shifted, just as studios and in the novel universe, different publishers. Conan Comics had different publishers as well. And after a long successful run, I'm not sure what happened. And Edgar Rice Burroughs copyright, or, you know, the people that control the rights, it went to Dark Horse for a good number of years.
Mhm.
And many people felt that the Dark Horse stories were, you know, kind of a slightly different tone, and you know, and not quite up to the same as Marvel. But then again, I've heard the reverse too. I've heard that they, you know, that they were very entertaining as well. It all depends on who the creative team was at the time.
I had them all, and I was very disappointed toward the end. They took Conan during the time of Belit, and they made him young emo Conan, so he was behaving like an emo kid. And then they took King Conan around the same time in some of their other magazines, and they made him like overweight and uncouth. So I didn't know what they were trying to do to humanize him, maybe, but I would wait until they came out in graphic novel form, and then wait till graphic novels got like $5 before I buy them, just because I'm a completist. But I stopped buying them as they came out because I wasn't just not enjoying it, I was like hating it.
Yeah, and once you've seen, your first version of the character, probably you read King Conan in the Marvel version,
Yes.
that's how you see him. That's so then to see another revision, it just doesn't jar, or gel correctly. And now, as we know, the rights, I believe the rights did go back to Marvel,
For a while.
for a while.
They put him on the Avengers. I stopped reading those too. He was in something called the Savage Avengers, and he was calling people bub like Wolverine. I stopped reading those as they came out too.
Yeah, that's Conan in the modern world just doesn't cut it for me. I mean, the closest that we got previously in Marvel was when Mary Jane, I believe it was before they were married, Mary Jane Watson in an issue of Marvel team up with Spider-Man, and there was a museum break-in, and Mary Jane Watson was there with Peter Parker, who had to first go off to become Spider-Man, and she grabs a sword, and being another redhead, it was a sword that brought Red Sonja into the world. Beautiful artwork, because I think it was John Byrne at the time who was on Marvel Team Up, and I do have that issue. And
I did three what ifs with Conan in the modern day, I think.
That's like bringing the Shadow into the modern world. I mean, sometimes that just doesn't work, in my opinion. I mean, I guess sometimes it can, but sometimes you just want certain characters to be in the era that they belong in. It's like bringing the Lone Ranger into modern times. And I know they tried it with Zorro, and I know they did it. Well, the Phantom is a whole other thing. So because he's just continuing, generational hero, but Conan is still has a lot of life to him. I can see this that they've started a whole new comic book line with Titan. I think they're trying to recapture the energy and the look of the Marvel era. So I've only caught a few issues, so I really haven't been able to follow what they're doing. But it does seem gritty. It does seem, you know, like it might go somewhere. So only time will tell. But I over the summer I got into watching the Conan TV series, which I did not when it was originally on because I could never find it on regular TV. I don't know when it was airing, but I caught it on YouTube, and I know he was a friend. The actor whose name escapes me was a friend of Arnold's.
Ralph Moore, yeah.
Yeah, and he does an acceptable version of Conan. I mean, that's not Arnold, but Arnold is Arnold. And they made it more of a team oriented
Right.
story. But again, this is TV. This was syndicated TV in the 90s. I liked their version of Red Sonja. I think it was almost better than the movie,
Mhm.
version. We couldn't get the metal bikini, which of course we all, Frank Thorne fans, and Frank Frazetta. That's how most of us see Red Sonja. But he had his own sidekicks, just like Arnold had in the movie. His pal, but they expanded the cast. Um, and it was fun. It was it was on a budget, and but the actor who played Picard's brother in Star Trek: The Next Generation, the episode right after the big Borg two-parter, it was playing the king and the evil king, and I thought, and talking to a flesh, uh, eaten skeleton. So
The skull that speaks, I think they call them, or the skull
yeah,
or
yeah.
something.
I mean, that looked a little hokey, but I thought the series was fun. and wished it had gone on, especially now that I've kind of discovered it after all this time. But I know that the Conan the Adventurer cartoon
Oh,
briefly had a comic book as well, which was obviously aimed at the same audience that we got with the cartoon, because you had to seriously tone it down
Yeah.
for a children's audience, which almost is unheard of for Conan for them to even consider doing a cartoon. But it did pretty well, actually. The first Conan the Adventurer had a good number of. I think it was on for a few seasons, or at least it had a good number of episodes.
Yeah, it had a good number. I don't remember how many seasons it was. The second cartoon didn't have that many episodes. I think it were like 18 or 20, and it didn't last much beyond that. They had one great line in the second cartoon. Conan talked about how he once knew a bird that talked, which played a very big part in the first cartoon series. And the
Mhm.
kid asked him, "What happened to the bird?" And he goes, "I ate it." So if you didn't see the first cartoon, you wouldn't be mortified. But that was pretty like horrible of him to do to a friend. That
Yeah, and just to throw in another aspect of Conan, Conan merchandise is on the rise. I mean,
Yes,
I myself, I'll admit it because I'm an oversized juvenile. I picked up the Super 7 Conan movie action figures, the 3 and 1/4 inch action figures, and they just added 3 more. I knew they were going to do Valeria, and they are, but with the camouflage, they're doing the camouflage
very
version.
cool. Do you have
Um,
a link to that? Because I have some of the action figures as well, so I'll look into that.
yeah, they think they just introduced them or they're pre-order, um, and they also have versions like the He-Man size, because as we might know, He-Man was supposed to be Conan.
And
That
Red
was supposed to
Sonja,
be the
yeah,
line. And for whatever reason, the studio may have felt it wouldn't
it
have.
was rated R, and Mattel didn't want to put out
Right.
merchandise for a movie that was rated R to kids. So they decided to come up with their own. Hercules and Xena were supposed to be Conan and Red Sonja too, and there were some rights issues. So they decided they would do their own Muscle Man and Warrior Woman, and they came up with Hercules and Xena. So Conan inspired those two things, He-Man and
Yeah.
Hercules Legendary Journeys.
Yeah, and well, there's now ones also from Super 7 that you could buy from that size, that the He-Man size.
Oh, very cool. I might still have one of the initial ones that they made a long time ago. Another company made the Conan ones from the movie.
Yeah.
I used to have them all, but that was many years ago. Bob, you too, you touched upon so many different topics that we're going to be returning to. The Sword and Sorcery show is going to be a little bit different than what we've been doing so far. Every show is going to have different people and different combinations of people talking about whatever they want to talk about in Sword and Sorcery. We're going to have one topic a month, and anybody wants to be on that panel, I'll put it out there, and anybody wants to be in there, where we'll discuss one thing, like Claw the Unconquered, or Starfire, or some obscure sword and sorcery, or Kirik of the Victories, or Kothar and Blue Fang,
Cool.
it's the name of the sword. So we'll be touching upon all these obscure things in a discussion forum, as well as having an episode where people talk about different things like we've been doing tonight. Even though tonight has been very heavy on Conan, the other episode we did had a bunch of different topics. And then I'm doing something a little bit different with spirituality as well. Uh, John Carter has been called like the sword of theosophy that Edgar Rice Burroughs did, because Burroughs was heavily influenced by theosophy. And if you know theosophy, you could spot all the theosophical elements. Like one example is Deja Thoris and the Martians were egg-born. And in theosophy, there's a phase of human spiritual evolution where humans were egg-born. And there's a lot more, but anyway, that's just one of them. And Lynn Carter, who did Thongor, and you also wrote some Conan and Kellery, so you had a large history of writing barbarian things, and the Barbarian at the Edge of Time, which is where scholars from the Edge of Time got their title from. He also admitted in some of his things that he based the Thongor legends on theosophical Lemurian legends. And he called Thongor Mahathangoya, the Great Thongoya, and said he translated them from Sanskrit or Senzar or some other obscure Eastern tongue. So theosophy is very much woven into sword and sorcery, although again, if you don't know theosophy, you can't see it. So I want to focus on the magical and spiritual elements of theosophy that appear in the sword and sorcery genre and do something creative with them. And there are forms of magic like chaos magic and pop culture magic that there's a ton of material about that are basically based on pop cultural icons and how magicians have been using these pop cultural icons to do magic. So we'll be exploring that through the show as well. And we'll also be seeing sword and sorcery as American myth making because it grew up in this country. This country is not very old, even though it has old European and other legends that inform it and form the currents that feed it. It's also made up its own futuristic legends with Star Trek and science fiction, and its own past legends with things like sword and sorcery. So we're going to be exploring those topics as well as talking about the genre, celebrating the genre and our appreciation of the genre. Bob, I lost your picture. Oh, Bob dropped out. Okay, so we have enough time for everybody to close with the contact information. So we'll go to Michael Del Russi first. Michael, how can people contact you?
Well, I just moved. I'm living in Clifton now, but they can write to me at Miriam Apartments, 7E at 135 Hazel Street in Clifton, New Jersey, and that's 07111. I should have my poetry collection here soon, as well as my creative help manual. If anyone's interested in ordering, I don't think they'll be disappointed, but that's my new address.
Thank you very much. And also until Michael gets more settled in, you can contact him on Facebook, where he will get back to you very quickly, or you can contact him through me. And Setna of Khemet, aka Michael K. Waterman, how can people contact you?
Very simple, either on Instagram or on Facebook. You can get me at the Pernatero Temple. I am accepting membership now. We are growing weekly, it seems, which is wonderful.
Awesome.
You can also get me at Phone a Wizard, which is my work site, which tells you the different services that I offer. You can get me on Michael K. Waterman on Facebook also. You can reach me by mail if you want to. That's Michael K. Waterman. 1699 Chatham, Chatham Parkway, apartment 1523A, Savannah, Georgia, 31405, or you can call me 516-650-3691. People are always saying that's your Long Island phone number. And I say, yes, I have so many contacts that I can't give up that phone number. It would take me too long to tell everybody, hi, I've got a new number. So please accept that. And you can also reach me, of course, through our master, Hercules Invictus.
Oh, I'm honored by your words. And I would like to, while you're both here, and I'll invite Bob later on, I would like to invite you to participate in two of my projects that I'm starting. One is the Astral Blue Lodge, which is again going to be a theosophical effort. It's how I'm starting the next step in the things that I've been doing. It will focus on creativity, imagination, being a co-creator or a creator in your life. It'll focus on the new thought traditions of that grew up here in this country, which form the basis of a lot of magic. And also we will be encouraging the heroic spirit in individuals, encouraging them to care for themselves, their loved ones, and their society to the best of their ability. So that's the first thing. I posted something about that today. And then the second thing is the theosophical aspects of American folklore. So I honor the Greco-Roman, Michael honors the Greco-Roman, Setna honors primarily the Egyptian, but also the Greco-Roman, and we all honor other streams as well, like Michael is a devout Christian. So this combination of paths, we're going to have like panels on that where we're going to be looking from the perspective that we represent different issues. So we start forming bridges and forming a vocabulary that allow everybody to communicate better. So I'd like to invite you both to participate in that if you'd like.
I would be honored.
Thank you. I'm honored.
I'd be excited to participate in that. There's so many techniques involved in the law of manifestation, the law of attraction. I think the listeners would benefit greatly from a concept like that.
So let's do it. There's an old saying,
Yeah.
if not now, then when? If not you, then who? So that we'll apply that to what we're doing. And I'll be glad to support everything that you guys are doing. And please use my page to promote what you're doing and the groups. And our conversation, as always, will be continued. Thank you both. I'm very honored that you're on this adventure with me, and I'm looking forward to our accomplishing great things together.
So mote it be.
So mote it be. Good night, everybody. Joyous journeys and amazing adventures.
Good night now.
And this will be up by tomorrow.
So be it.